All right, all right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're live, MythVision podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert, and I recently had an email sent to me from a gentleman who goes by the name Canadian Catholic, and he wrote me on email and said, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you, like some of your stuff, don't like some of your stuff, or don't draw the conclusion on some of your stuff. And so I was like, okay, let me find out more. Let me, what do you want to talk about? He said, does Jesus exist? Does God exist? And is Christianity true? Generic questions, just basically saying he'd like to have a conversation with me and want to know more about where I'm coming from. I'd like to know more about where he's coming from. And so you can actually find him on YouTube. Just type in the search bar Canadian Catholic, and it's the first YouTube channel that pops up. Or just go down in the description, you guys. If you're interested in checking out his YouTube channel, it's there. Welcome, everybody. All right. So with that being said, welcome to the channel, Joshua. I'm going to try to refer to you as Canadian Catholic just because it's
whichever you prefer. Yeah, my name is Joshua. Thanks to Derek, I saw his channel, and I gotta say I wasn't impressed at all. I was actually quite, I wouldn't say angered, but a little bit irate. Because I remember there was other channels that I'm used to criticism of Christianity in general. Mm-hmm. I'm an ex-atheist, but I used to encounter these channels in the past that would say, we just explore myths. And then I would go on, and it wouldn't be a myth exploration. It was 90% of it was anti-Christian stuff, right? And I come on here, and I saw a lot of anti-Christian stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm not a fan of this, so why not challenge Derek, I guess, to debate? And then Derek said, well, I don't really do debates. I prefer conversations. And I said, well, What's the difference to me? I just called conversations debates anyway. So he said, which questions do you prefer? And I gave, these are the options. You choose whichever, or you can suggest one. And, he just scrambled and got me on here. So I'm honored to be, educating you guys about the faith. Go ahead, Derek.
So what makes you a Christian? What let me ask you this. So you believe Christianity is true, obviously. You wouldn't have approached me if you didn't. What makes Christianity true to you? Do you believe that it's absolutely the case? Like, what evidence do you have to know that this is true? Or is it an emotional? Is there some type of approach that you...
No, not at all. I mean, it's actually probably a weakness of mine that I am an intellectual convert, and that's usually derided. Now, I know that in these circles that's actually considered a virtue, but in a lot of circles it's considered actually a vice to simply be an intellectual convert, and I've had a heavy emphasis on the intellectual side. I am a foundationalist in epistemology, or lean towards that way. And I think that truth is that which corresponds to reality. And I think truth is valuable for its own sake, not just because we can benefit from it. So I think that, I think that Christianity is true. That's why I'm a Christian. I wouldn't be a Christian if it weren't true.
Right. You believe it's true. What I'm saying is what made you believe that Christianity is true, since you're talking about an intellectual approach, like there's some type of evidence that proves that this is true. What was the evidence for you that made you believe this is true? All other faiths are not. What makes this one true?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting question people ask, but it's not as complicated as it is. First of all, I think that there can only, through discursive reasoning, we can discover that there can only, in principle, ever be one God. And this God would have many of the attributes that traditional Abrahamic God, some would say Zoroastrian and Baha'i God, would have. And from then on, I just think it's a simple matter of Bayesian inquiry or Bayesian analysis of which religious tradition that is in line with a singular, powerful God is more likely to have evidence. And I think on the Bayesian scale, when we analyze all the worldviews, the facts that are consistent with Christianity are much far outweigh other religions. And again, I'm not doing a Christianity versus 4,000 religions. I'm more like doing Christianity versus around 6 other worldviews, because I think that through natural reason alone, we can lower the bar down to there being only one divinely simple God, and that's only consistent with a few worldviews, not thousands.
Is it possible there couldn't be a God?
But when you're asking me, is it possible, what modality are you using? Are you saying, is it logically possible that there is no God?
Well, I'm saying you're assuming there is, and if there was, or if there is some type of beings that obviously created all things, to you, the most plausible would be a monotheistic one. And then I'd like to ask, just so that we know we're on the same page, how far back, you're not a young earth creationist, you accept the evolutionary model?
I consider myself a theistic evolutionist. I was raised a young earther. I was strong in the young earth movement. I thought that people who didn't adhere to young earth creationism were wrong and compromising Christianity a lot. And I deconverted after that.
Mankind's been around at least a couple 100,000 years in your view, right? Theistic evolutionary. You accept evolution, but you say God's involved, correct?
Yeah, I accept theistic evolution, but also I accept some other stuff that we, for example, have to accept that Adam was a historical figure, or an Adam-like figure existed, and we have to accept that Adam was the first man. Now, what that means is open to interpretation. You don't have to accept that Adam was literally the first of this kind created. We could accept that Adam was the first one to whom God gave the intellect and the will. So there are a couple of things we can't compromise, but yeah, I'm fine with theistic evolution. And
now, is that a Catholic thing? Because a lot of Catholics I talk to are very open to the idea of Genesis 1 through 11 being mythology or having allegorical approach to this. They're like, it's not historically reliable in that sense. It's a myth.
Yeah, that's a popular myth that people say that Catholics are necessarily into that. The church has no official pronouncement. The church simply defines what can't be compromised. And the facts that can't be compromised are that Adam existed. You can't compromise that. You can't compromise that there was original sin.
So we kind of went off path here, but I do like that you answer those. I say that to say, so when I say, like, what was it that convinced you Christianity was true? Like, what was it that made you convinced that this was the truth? Would it be more of a Bayesian probability approach? Is that that way you would approach this? Or
there's two different questions. Why do I think Christianity is true now, or what convinced me? Do I have to go into my history? What I think makes Christianity true, what evidence supports it is, one, that we can, through discursive reasoning, discover that there is one divinely simple God, and two, that's step one, and two, after we discover that through discursive reasoning, we can, using Bayesian models, evaluate possible worldviews that could accommodate such a God. And on those worldviews, I think Christianity wins, because on Christianity you get more Bayesian results. There is more that would be consistent on a Bayesian analysis with Christianity than would be with other faiths, which are sometimes closer, sometimes further.
I'm interested in knowing why you think people rose from the dead, why you think a guy walks on water, these things. Like, for example, when we look at Vespasian, he steps on a withered man's hand, or he spits in the eye of a guy in the Serapean temple. And there's this praise. There's even an eyewitness, he says, that to this day, I think it's Tacitus or Suetonius, one of the historians who said this happened. Did he do that? I mean, did Vespasian actually perform such an act? And I mean, if we're granting miracles, we're granting the supernatural at this point, do you think that other worldviews have capabilities of performing supernatural tendencies and such? I mean, where do you draw the line? You see what I'm saying?
So just to clarify quickly, this is a common resort that people use. I'm not saying you're doing this.
I'm definitely doing this because I think
that's fine.
important.
I'll explain. That's totally fine. So I just want to clarify that I've told you, I haven't told the audience, I consider myself a citizen historian. I'm very into history. You guys can see that. That's Ramses II, the Pharaoh of Exodus, right there on my shelf, or so the story goes. And the question is, what about other miracle claims? My fundamental question is that this whole idea that history or science cannot investigate the supernatural is flawed. We have to investigate supernatural claims just like any other claims. And I would argue that if there is good evidence to think that Vespasian had performed several miraculous things, then I don't see why I wouldn't be open to accepting it.
So what would make you think Jesus performed these things? I mean, like, we're looking at a book, right? We're looking at books, a compilation of text, literature that seems highly theological, not like your straightforward literature you would think of a historian just writing, this is accurate history. It seems highly theological, potentially mythological in some sense. I mean, what convinces you that this is true that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fine. So again, whatever else you might want to say, there's only two options. Either Christianity is true or it's not true. So from that alone.
Well, what is Christianity then? Because I think to say if it's true or not, which I did this on purpose. The thumbnail is a yes, it's false, or it's true. And there's Jesus in the middle with the heart, the Catholic heart and all that.
Let me just make something clear.
Go ahead.
either Christianity is true or it's not true. And from the dialectic, you already get the two worldviews we talked about on the Bayesian scale. You get the not Christian true worldview, you get the Christianity true worldview. And then you take the facts about the world and compare them on a Bayesian scale. So we ask a couple of questions. Let's first compile things that are not consistent with Christianity. We observe evil in the world, okay? We observe evidence of evil, and we say, okay, Christianity can make sense of it, but it's better made sense of on this worldview, whatever this worldview is, the non-Christian one. But then we take the evidence for the resurrection and say, okay, let's say, and then again, we get two worldviews. Either the resurrection of Christ occurred or it did not. Again, we do the same comparison. If Christ's resurrection occurred and Christ was who he said he was, then we would expect this to be a world-changing event. Now, that's not saying that the opposite would not account for it, but it's more predicted on this worldview, and thus it is evidence for that worldview. That's how Bayesian method works. And that's basic idea of how we do these.
So in light of your Bayesian system that you just brought up, right, this is a really good point. When we look at the world around us, and this one might call out a fallacy here, okay? And I'm not trying to bring out, like I'm trying to attempt some secret sly, here's a card trick, I'm trying to trick people here. This is common sense to me. People don't rise from the dead. You would agree, right? Like 100%. Now, someone who's God in the flesh might, but then you also have to buy into who this man is. You buy into the package of prophecy.
Well, I have to clarify that I actually do think that people rose from the dead. I think Lazarus rose from the dead. I think the widow's son of Nain rose from the dead.
So biblical characters, Elijah, all these stories, I get it.
No, they're not just biblical characters. Actually, the belief goes that they're actual people that existed. And
right, and even if they did, I mean, granted, there are stories, like I said, we go to the Bible.
So it's not like, so our belief is that actually happened. So, I believe that people have been raised from the dead.
Why do you believe that those things happened? That's what I'm saying. It's written in a book in antiquity, but you don't believe Vespasian is healing people in the Serapeum temple, or Asclepius isn't healing people.
Can I just clarify? I never said I don't believe those things. I'm saying I don't have enough information to make a judgment case. I do think that there have been miraculous occurrences outside of the Bible. I believe in their narration and stuff. I do, obviously. I don't think that after biblical times. Well, I'm not going to go there. That's a theological point.
Are you talking about the cessation of miraculous gifts of healing?
I believe that miracles still happen. What I think is that now the public revelation isn't happening. Private revelation might, but not public. That's the Catholic doctrine.
Right.
But you're familiar with that. I think many Protestants even have something like that. But so just to clarify the point, I never took a position on Vespasian. What I'm saying is I know I've studied this. I haven't studied Vespasian's miraculous claims as much. I don't know what the Bayesian evidence for that would be.
So let me ask you a simple question.
Yeah.
I like to play through scenarios. I want us to slow down our conversation a little bit, because I think we can get, quick to try and take jabs and this and this and that. And I think it's important that we slow down the conversation, because I want to ask you a few different scenarios. Elijah or Elisha, I think it's Elisha. We just talked about this earlier, me and Dr. Price. There's these 42 kids that call him bald. Okay. They cry out, bald head, bald head. Sure enough, you don't call the prophet bald head. And then all of a sudden, Elijah or God, I cannot remember the exact scenario within the biblical account.
Elisha, actually.
2 bears come, right? And they maul 42 children. Now, do you think that was a historical event, that since these kids mocked the prophet calling him bald head, that 2 bears actually, historically, in reality, came out of nowhere and killed 42 kids?
Well, I have no reason to think otherwise. I mean, I don't think it's heretical if somebody thinks that's a non-historical event. I don't think that that's condemned, but I have no reason to think it's not something that happened in history.
That's interesting. The way that you're viewing that. Do you do the same? And I know you'll say, well, yeah, I'd approach it and I'd look at the text and stuff. Yeah. But if we approached a different, like Greek mythology, and we saw something that seemed really strange, and you'd go, well, that doesn't sound like an ordinary thing, like what we expect the world to look like, that 2 bears, because these kids call a guy bald, ended up judging these 42 children and have them killed. If we looked at Greek mythology, would you treat it the same way and go, well, I have no reason to doubt that didn't happen? I would say, since it sounds like it happened and it says that it happened in the narrative.
Well, I think there's a good dissimilarity. We have a priori good reason for thinking that Greek mythology whatever else it may be, is built on a false premise. We have good reasons to think that Christianity, at least the prima facie claims, are built on good evidence. So that's the dissimilarity. I gave you.
So we're talking Judaism, by the way.
I wasn't done.
We're talking Judaism now.
Yeah, Judaism is compatible with classical theism. The Greek mythos relies on polytheism. And polytheism is something that is going to be ruled out through discursive reasoning, because we can reason our way to there being only one God.
See, now that you jumped from looking at these narratives to polytheism, I'm simply looking at narratives. So you're already going back to this God idea that there must be a monotheistic approach. If you're going to approach the world around us, there's only one God that makes sense of this idea. Where did polytheism come into the mix when I'm simply saying if we read a Greco-Roman narrative where something seems that wouldn't be ordinary, that doesn't seem normal, why wouldn't we assume that it did happen if it doesn't assert that it didn't?
Yeah, so we don't look at things through, again, when using Bayesian reasoning, you have to bring in all the probability and all the facts in the world. I told you that this is one dissimilarity between Christianity and Greek texts. The other, of course, is that you're asking me to look at these texts in a vacuum, right? You're asking me to completely make no theological assumptions, just look at them as a product of nature, and I usually don't do that. That being said, I have no problem looking at them through historical lens. There's multiple lenses at which I could look at. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, I am not like one of those people that doesn't think scholarship is helpful. I have I've devoted a significant chunk of my time reading things about Greek scholarship. I mean, I read stuff all the time.
Right.
So, yeah. So I have no problem.
There's a book, by the way, that you might want to check out.
Yeah.
It goes into the Bayesian probability of the resurrection. And this is something I'm going to be interviewing this guy, Jonathan M.S. Pierce, and a critical examination of the Easter story. But he goes into Bayesian theory, and his conclusions are based on a Bayesian probability scale that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. So I'd be interested to hear you, being that you use a Bayesian model, and potentially I'd be interested in setting up a debate between you and Dr. Richard Carrier, because I myself don't do debates, but I will have conversations. Dr. Richard Carrier's big on the Bayesian stuff. I'd rather stay away from the mythicist argument with you and simply get into the whole resurrection argument.
I have interacted with Dr. Carrier's stuff multiple times. I will say that I think Dr. Carrier is an interesting individual. I've corresponded with him multiple times. I just think he's fundamentally wrong about the issue. He gets the scholarship wrong, unfortunately. And I would be honored to have a debate on your channel.
I just say that because I'm not a Bayesian guy.
That's fine. That's fine. I understand. Yeah, but it's new for a lot of people. That's totally fine.
Yeah, he's your Bayesian guy. And if you're going to do let's approach, did Jesus rise from the dead, or is Christianity true, using a Bayesian theory, I'd be interested in having someone who knows Bayesian. That would be an approach that I'd like to take. But another question, I asked this of my friend. I got a brain fart here. I just almost said capturing Christianity. Who was
probably
it?
Not your friend.
Big YouTube. No. I just had a brain fart because I was trying to ask, do you think the Jonah story was historically reliably true, or do you interpret that in a different way? Was there a man actually swallowed by a giant fish in the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights in the depths of the ocean? Do you think that is a historical, or would you put that in a different genre? How do you approach that kind of text?
Well, I would say I don't take a position on the Jonah story, to be honest. What I think is that either way you approach it, the fundamental nature is clear. It's clearly was very important to the church as a, how shall I put this, as a kind of a foreshadowing of Christ's descent, Christ showing God showing a blessing to a pagan nation like Assyria, again a foreshadowing of what would happen with Rome. And in that sense, I really don't think there's much difference to be made whether there was. I mean, I think that there was a historical person called Jonah. That's something that we have to accept because he's a saint. And if there was no Jonah, who do we pray to, right? But other than that, again, I wouldn't take any position.
So it's interesting you say that, because it makes me think that pretty much the church, if the church is standing on something, you would go with what the church is actually saying, correct? Like, yeah. And this is not me trying to pull a trick on you or something. Like, I'm trying to simply ask you what the Catholic Church asserts. If they have an assertion, they say this is the case. Other stuff is up for grabs. If you want to disagree on that, that's cool. But if it says something is, you accept what it says, right?
Yeah. So we believe that the church The Catholic Church simply means a universal church. Like, people like to do this stuff where they Catholic. It just means universal church. It's
Right.
the church Christ established, according to our theology, and it has authority. That's actually what is evident in the texts.
Mm-hmm.
So if the church excommunicates you and you can start your own church, the whole process of point of having a church is moot. So we take the church very seriously. We take ecclesiology seriously, and as we believe that church has God-given authority to define dogma and or even doctrines. And I think that those parts that are doctrine are important to be received. While I don't know if there is a doctrinal teaching on Jonah, I'm speaking off the cuff. I'm pretty sure that there is good reason to accept that Jonah is actually existed, because Jonah is canonized in the church. He's a saint.
So if I approach this critically, because I have some critical scholars who will say Jonah's a late book, right? They'll say Jonah is a late narrative, potentially comedic. It's kind of a comedy. A prophet who doesn't want to be a prophet, but he's.
I don't rule those out. I don't rule those interpretations out at all.
But like, let's say that the scholars say, this book was written 3rd century BC, but he's saying that this happened 6th century BC, let's say, okay, or 7th or 8th, whatever. Or look at Daniel. Like, how do you approach Daniel as a Catholic? Do you guys think that Daniel actually was written in the 6th century BC?
Unlike the boogie stuff, church doesn't have those standing, but this is what century it was written in. The church doesn't deal with those. The church usually sets parameters on important stuff, right? So, for example, you have to accept that the Gospels are historical. You have to accept this, that, right? You don't have these things where you have to actually accept the date or something. The church doesn't make such pronouncements. That being said, I think that there's good reasons to accept that Daniel was written later, as some scholarship suggests. And there are other people who think there is good reason to accept earlier. I, again, don't see a reason to take a position there. I generally assume that the person I'm talking to assumes a late date, so I'm fine with that. I just roll with that one. Rather than doing it. But I'm not close to the idea that it was written early.
Okay. I'm a skeptic.
Yeah.
I was a Christian.
Yeah.
People will throw whatever mud they want at me for why you left. You just want to sin. You just da-da-da-da-da. Okay. I'll give whatever they want to say. It's fine. But
I don't think so. I think many atheists are intelligent people. I certainly was. I don't think that they leave because they want to sin. Some of them are intelligent. The problem isn't that you left. The problem is, after you grow from being 12, why are you still stuck in not understanding, right? That's what I'm saying. I was just joking. I was trying to
make No. Please tell me how ignorant I am.
I was joking. I'm just going to clarify again. I don't think you lack intelligence or anything. I think many atheists have a lot of intelligence. Again, I don't think I was. It wasn't lack of intelligence that made me an atheist.
I don't think it's an intelligence thing for why people are Christians either. So it's like, it has zero to do, in my opinion, as to this up here. I think it's more, there's a lot more to it than just an intellectual approach, which is why I want to probe a little more.
Yeah.
Someone like me who's looking at things and trying to know what we can and cannot know about something. And I say, I don't find that a guy rising from the dead is the case. I think it's more probable that something else could potentially explain this data than someone actually rose from the dead. What would you, as someone who believes and is taking this intellectual approach, is trying to tell me it's intellectual and factual that Jesus actually rose from the dead? How would you tell me that?
Yeah. So I actually had that process exactly when coming back to Christianity, where I was, okay, some things make sense to me. Like, it makes sense to me that there is a God, maybe. But what about this stuff? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, Adam, this, that. And what I actually read was William Lane Craig's advice. And William Lane Craig was actually had such a situation that I guess I am in, I was, and you are somewhat in, where he actually doubted the virgin birth. And his advice was, okay, leave that off for a little bit. Concentrate on what you know, right? Don't use those things that you can't get over as an excuse, okay? Put that aside. Put your inability to grasp the resurrection or whatever you're having trouble with, and go back. Do you think there's a God? And if you agree there's a God, okay, good. And then you want to talk specifically about Christianity. Do you think there was a man that existed, Jesus? And just push that to where it leads. Don't get sidetracked by things you feel. Let's say you draw the barrier at this. I'll believe this, but this is just too much for me. Go back and say, okay, fine, that's fine. Okay, don't believe that Jesus resurrected. Let's take it slowly. Do you believe that Paul's letters, at least some of them, are authentic? Then you'll say, okay, that's fine. That's not bad. And then I tell you, do you believe that he knew Christ's brother as he claims? And you'll say, well, that's not that crazy of a claim. I can accept that. And do you believe they all believe that Christ rose from the dead? Okay, and do you believe that that belief was held by those who knew Jesus? All right. And do you believe that belief changed the entire world as we know it and changed the whole history? Okay, and there you go. You're already closer. Your barrier becomes closer than it originally was. So that's how I would say approach it. Because again, it becomes hard for me too to accept some of. It was hard for me too to accept some basics.
Yeah, there's a lot you just did there. By the way, there's a lot of. Like the way you connect those dots from, let me go back to, is there a God? And then let's start going all the way to Christianity. I do have a super chat. Let me go ahead and jump to the super chat because
That's fine.
Someone, I really appreciate you being patient here. I hope you're still watching. Appreciate it. Kokichi World Order says, how does Canadian Catholic explain the complete lack of Jesus teachings, sayings, actions, historical geography, and characters in the letters of Paul?
Yeah, I would respond, Kakichi, that unfortunately, as much as I respect Richard Carrier, he's been wrong about this stuff. Jesus' teachings do appear in the New Testament, actually. When you take away the conspiracy lens, Paul clearly teaches that there was a Eucharist. Paul teaches that Christ was crucified. And yes, crucifixion is what Romans did. It's not something that happened in outer space. That's nonsense, okay? And I have most respect for Dr. Carrier, but you have to take away those lenses. Christ's teachings about divorce appear in Paul's teachings. And also what Dr. Carrier doesn't let on is that Dr. Carrier has a fantastic methodology that goes against Bayesianism, which is that he's going to take, these are the letters of Paul that are undisputed, and we're going to only judge from those. What Dr. Carrier doesn't let on is that the other Pauline letters are disputed. They're not disproven, they're disputed, meaning some of them have high credence, some lower credence, and a lot turns on Dr. Carrier's commitment, which again is a negative on you on the Bayesian scale. So I would say, I forgot his name, I apologize. Derek just took it away because he doesn't like it.
It disappeared, man.
I'm joking,
it disappeared.
I'm joking. So what I would tell you is take off that lens and put on common sense lens, or not even common sense, like mainstream historical lens, and you will find plenty of teachings of Christ that are in there. And again, against Dr. Carrier, those disputed letters of Paul, some of them have at least 50-60% of chance, even in mainstream academia, of being of Paul. And when your commitments are so dependent on them failing, that's a net negative on a Bayesian scale. So,
and could it potentially be that our commitments on them being accurate or true also weigh as a bias in the opposite direction?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, like, for example, if we want something to be true or we want something to be the case, sometimes our bias in either direction. I think sometimes skeptics are over skeptical.
Look, sure.
I say that as a skeptic. So yeah. Anyway, he has another super chat for you. He's becoming your best friend now. Kokichi World Order says, how does Bayesian analysis prove the ever virginity of Mary?
How does the Bayesian analysis prove the ever virginity of Mary? That's a good question. So, okay. So you start with Bayesian analysis of what is correct. And, if you have good reason to believe that Christianity is true and the Christian church is correct, then you have prima facie good reason for considering a long-held belief in that church. And ever virginity of Mary is actually probably the earliest extra-biblical Mariological doctrine. That's actually quite interesting. And I think that the ever virginity of Mary is quite good. Now, it would be much tougher if somebody said Assumption of Mary, because the situation is a little different there. But the ever virginity of Mary is the earliest extra-biblical Mariological doctrine. That's accepted in Lutheranism, Anglicanism, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox.
You accept it, right?
Of course.
So I saw, if I'm not mistaken, you definitely take the approach that James is the brother of Jesus, correct? Do you take the approach that Mary didn't conceive James, though?
Yeah, I don't believe that James was the son of Mary. That being said, I do use the word brother the same way as Genesis 14:14 uses the brother to refer to a relative. So I will encourage those people to go to Genesis 14:14 and Septuagint that calls Lot, and other places, but Genesis 14:14 is the obvious because that calls Lot an Adelphoi, or a brother of Abraham. Mm-hmm. And that's what I accept. about James. James was a brother of the Lord. I don't believe he was the son of Mary, but he was a brother of the Lord. That is to say, a blood relative.
I just figure I'd ask because there's a lot that I would need way more proof for. I can't accept these just because it's in a book. I couldn't. And look,
all that means is your brain is functioning properly. You don't have to worry about it. Okay?
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
But that's the thing I'm saying is like, for me, I understand as one who was a believer, having faith and believing this is true, right?
Yeah.
Other people believe it's true. And it seemed normal. And now that I'm actually being critical, right? And I'm like, okay, let me stop for a second. Why do I think this is true and everything else is wrong?
Yeah.
Especially, I didn't even accept the whole theistic evolution approach. I couldn't believe that we were around that long and somehow,
me neither.
God comes on the scene and decides just in the past couple thousand years to reveal salvation when we've been around this long.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that made me go, this doesn't add up, And I don't expect you having a conversation with me to somehow this is like, oh, this is going to steer you or me in any direction. I wanted to have this conversation with you since you wrote me. And I said, look, I want to show people who totally disagree with one another that you can have these conversations. I just don't take that leap of saying these things are true. And
look, I totally understand that. You know what I'm saying? Like, even when I was drawn back to Christianity, like I would wake up in the morning and say, no, it's far-fetched. God doesn't need to play hide and seek with us. I used to say all of those things. I mean, you're just recounting my story, basically. The thing is, my advice is don't let your imagination limit you. That's been my advice to a lot of people over the years.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think there's better explanations that could potentially fit the data that makes more sense to me than what we've been
that's your
told.
first mistake.
My first mistake?
Yeah. Well, not your first mistake, but your first mistake in what you articulated right now.
Please tell me where I'm.
So this idea about making sense. The truth is that studying a field, whether it's theology, philosophy, history, or science, is about finding counterintuitive answers. And that's really what we call learning. If everything in learning made sense to us, we wouldn't be learning. We would be indoctrinated, okay? Well, maybe I didn't say that well, but at least it sounds nicer. So basically, you study things to hear counterintuitive stuff. You need to get used to having your world shaken once in a while. It's actually pretty liberating to be wrong about something.
There's a reason I'm a skeptic today.
Everyone has to experience to have something they believe for so long just be wrong, completely wrong. And
could you be wrong? This is the thing I'm getting at is like, you think I'm wrong and you're very assertive about that, right?
Yeah.
I think you're mistaken. I really do. I think you're mistaken. I think all Christians are mistaken, just like I would say all Muslims, and so are all Jews, and so are all people who believe their things ontologically. They believe these things are actually true.
Of course.
And I would start with saying, right, you said you believe more than just Jesus rose from the dead, right? And I'd go, okay, how would we go about proving people rise from the dead? Now, obviously, that would be a miracle. You and me would both say, okay, this is under very rare circumstances. Yeah. You would look at the text and say, these books say these things happen. I'd start it back at God is real, since you believe there's a God, and you go down all the way, following this connect the dots down to Christianity and say,
so let me ask you, what is it that makes it impossible for you to believe that someone could rise from there? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you, you're open
what's
to God.
More probable?
Wait, stop. Let me finish. So you believe that God could exist, right?
It's possible.
Yeah. So if you're willing to accept all of that, right, that it's possible, like, what is it that actually makes it so hard for you to believe that someone rose from the dead? And more importantly, let's say that there was a situation where someone rose from the dead, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you expect that event to be probably the most important event that has defined world history? Like, if you were to wager somebody rose from the dead, like, wouldn't your wager be on Jesus? Like, if somebody were to there's at least one person that's risen from the dead, point to him, that your first response would be Jesus, because that's
the one I know the most. That's it.
Yeah,
but
there is a reason you know it the most, right?
There's a reason I know it the most, because it became the most popular religion. One day, the Muslims are going to say the same thing as to why Allah and Muhammad is his final prophet. They're going to say, look at our most popular religion. They're going to say the reason when we were so successful is because God was behind it.
Actually, Islam doesn't exist without Jesus being the Messiah. So, I mean...
Yeah, I get it. I know what... Yeah, I have that. I understand their tenets and what they think about Jesus. What I'm saying is they'll use this argument that because it's so successful.
I didn't use that argument about it being successful.
No, I know. I'm
The
saying what
event
they will say, and
that's fine, and they're wrong because their religion is also defined, at least in most part, by what happened to Christ, one, at death. That's actually a key difference between us and Christ being the Messiah. Muslims agree with that, and they believe he's in heaven and will come to judge us. So any way you look at it, Jesus is
they're just borrowing Christianity, by the way. That's all.
I'm not going to judge Muslims here, okay? I have much respect for Muslims and some Islamic philosophy. I'm just saying that Muslims objectively believe that Christ is the Messiah. So you have no escape from saying, oh, they'll say something. It's an Abrahamic religion. And if you're willing to accept Muslim tenets, you have to believe that Christ raised people from the dead.
Right.
So
and I'm totally against all of that. Yeah. Right. I'm with you on that.
From that. Islam isn't something that offers you escape from this.
So where were we? I was trying to point out what's more probable. People rise from the dead or some other explanation. Potentially one person, maybe a couple people, I'm sure you've heard apologia, may have had an experience, a post-mortem experience. Apotheosis were a common thing in the ancient world. Is that a potential one like James D. Tabor talks about? There's even explanations coming from the Christian scholar. Hold on one second. The Delcy Allison. I recently interviewed him on the resurrection, and I said, if you were a skeptic putting on your skeptic cap, right, which position would you think makes the most sense as a skeptic? Now, he's not a skeptic. He's a Christian, but he even came to the conclusion, well, someone stole the body probably. And, he came up with another alternative. If this were to happen today and it wasn't Jesus, starting with all your preconceived ideas about God and the going down into Christianity, if someone said they rose from the dead, I would hope you and me both would be skeptical of that kind of approach. If it wasn't the name of Jesus, you probably would be. But because Jesus is...
everything in history has to be evaluated according to a Bayesian analysis. That's probably the best one we have today.
I feel like I gotta finish reading this damn book then, and then we can continue the Bayesian conversation.
Actually, you can scratch that off and take Richard Swinburne's paper on the resurrection. It's much shorter and much better, I would argue. And Richard Swinburne is a wonderful...
Have you read this? Have you read this book before?
No, I have not. But if it's been endorsed by David Fitzgerald, it's probably bad.
Oh, so okay, I see. So if it's not a Christian endorsed,
I'm not talking about Christian. I'm saying that as much as I respect David, his scholarship is horrible. Okay, and what I'm saying is I have prima facie good reason to doubt that book is good. I'm open to reading it. I'm not making harsh judgments.
Sounds like a judgment to me.
Well, okay, then I'm judgmental.
Okay, well, another super chat.
All right.
What does Canadian Catholic think about Jesus insane screaming at a fig tree? Does that seem like the wisdom of knowledge of someone who was 100% God?
Yeah. So, Kokichi, first of all, I want to thank you so much for spending so much money on me. It's an honor that you would enrich Derek here.
Hey, Kokichi's my friend now. You know what I mean? He's looking out for me.
Now he's my friend at this point. So, Kokichi, I'm sorry to be a slightly judgmental of you, but I think your, I guess, anti-Christian fundamentalism has blinded you towards the true meaning of the text. It's actually the fig tree narrative is one of the most beautiful that's found in the Gospel of Mark and one of the most meaningful. The meaningful part is, if I recall correctly, Christ coming out shows that the tree having no fruit that will be withering is an how do I recall this? Is an allegory, an analog of what happens to the Jews.
That's beautiful.
What do you mean?
What happened to the Jews?
Wait, what's going to happen to the Jewish religious leaders after their tree has been found withering? And now I have to recall the exact analysis on this, but basically my point is, you can read more. I'm butchering this probably, but Kokichi, the problem is that your anti-Christian fundamentalism has blinded you to the meanings of these texts. They've really made you look at this stuff and go, oh, well, Jesus was insane. Instead of going and diving into the text and understanding how much depth there is to how Jesus evaluates and this paradoxical behavior that nobody understands, but the reader is supposed to. That is Mark's point. They are all confused, but you have to understand what he's saying. Because Mark, at least as is conventional, was written either somewhere around the Jewish war, close to a Jewish war. So the reader is supposed to understand what the parable was about a withered fig tree that two people who were there sounded so paradoxical. And you are blinded to these beauties, my friend, by applying anti-Christian fundamentalism.
Do you think there's anti-Semitism in the New Testament? I have to ask you that because a lot of scholars have seen this, and they're like, there's...
So people say that about there being anti-Semitism in the New Testament. We have to be clear in distinguishing multiple forms of what anti-Semitism is. So one is racial anti-Semitism, and we do not accept that. What we accept is that there is judgment on Jewish religious leaders and the Jewish religion. Now, that being said, we accept that, and I understand how some people might get this idea that there is anti-Semitic thing, because I think the most quote controversial moment is when Jews say, "Well, upon us be this crime and upon our bloodlines," and again, it's something that has been mistaken. Now, I would say we should be anti-Semitic. We need to oppose anti-Semitism. I am as far from anti-Semite as one gets, but I think I see why some scholars see anti-Semitism. I think ultimately they're misguided.
Okay, Anthony Guthrie, my good friend, says, given that Yahweh, Jesus, and James all indicated that the Old Testament laws were to be upheld until heaven and earth passed away, thoughts on slavery as Yahweh outlined in Leviticus 25:44 through 46, etc.
So just a quick clarification. Many people completely misunderstand the meaning. The Old Covenant is not valid, no longer valid, as all of the New Testament writers make it clear. What is valid is what from the Old Law has been renewed in the New. So, for example, 10 Commandments are still binding on us as Christians because 10 Commandments have been renewed. Now, that being said, thoughts on slavery as Yahweh outlined in Leviticus 25:44, 46. Okay, so slavery is not part of the law. Slavery is part of regulations that were applied. Slavery is not a command towards us. Slavery regulations, as applies to Leviticus, are historical records that are preserved for us. And my thoughts are that it's very important and culturally enriching for us to know what was the situation like for Israel. And I think those are my quick thoughts on the topic offhand.
And there's a whole bunch there. Yeah, there's a whole bunch there to get into about slavery, but that's not even another one. My good friend William, another super chat, says, what does Canadian Catholic think about conservative bishops wanting to deny communion to politicians who hold social views not in line with the church doctrine?
Yeah, this is a big one. So first of all, denying communion is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a statement. That being said, I think that denying communion to politicians about abortion is slightly... I mean, again, I'm not going to take a position on that, but it's not like conservatives banned abortion or anything, right? I mean, we know that I'm not in the United States, but in Canada or anywhere, abortion happens, and both conservatives and liberals have been complicit in it. So I don't think that it's necessarily the best thing to single out a politician diving communion just for that. That being said, I'm not going to comment on the bishop's decisions. I think that Catholics need to try to be faithful as much as they can, and it's just a sad situation that we have to go through this anyways. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I've got some more questions I'd like to ask, if that's okay. Real quick, one more super chat. Cryptician says, no such thing as resurrection. If you lost consciousness for extended time and regained consciousness, then you was never dead during your time of unconsciousness. Yeah,
Cryptician, I'm so sorry that you're stuck in this phase. Unfortunately, I have good stuff that I guess I'm insulting. I apologize. You're a patron or maybe not a patron, but a donator. So I'll take a softer tone with you. So that consciousness question used to bother me a lot. And what I've gotten into is what I call psychology in the original sense, which is the philosophy of mind. And I think from philosophy of mind, we have pretty good reasons to think that human intellect is immaterial, and thus post-death, it survives physical death. And if you want to have a discussion on that or anything, just reach out. Sorry, Derek, what were you going to ask?
Yeah. All right. A couple gentlemen I'd like to get your thoughts about.
Yeah.
I think you've had a few conversations with Pine Creek.
Yes.
What do you think about Pine Creek? What do you think
I
about
love
his
Pine Creek.
skepticism?
I love Pine Creek. I have all of his notifications turned on, so I get my Pine points whenever the show starts.
Have you actually gotten Pine points, though?
I've gotten 1,400 Pine points.
Shut up.
Yeah, I have.
You're not my friend anymore.
Yeah, I got 1,000 Pine points for hosting him on my channel, and I got 400 for.
Dude, this is so not even right. A Catholic. A Catholic over me. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more. I have
what do you think about his worldview, his epistemology? I mean, obviously you disagree with him, but if you could wrap it up in a nutshell.
Well, I think I love him, but he's also a coper. He likes to cope a lot. And I've called him out on this a couple of times, where instead of confronting evidence, he will employ coping strategies, such as about like flying mans or some stuff that he makes people sound ridiculous. But again, I have nothing but love for Pine Creek. We share a dry humor.
I think I know he's done the Flying Man with me before, and this goes into the whole why I was saying like what makes the resurrection true. You know, people die every day. Billions of people have died since 2,000 years ago, billions, and no reason to think they're coming back, right? So this resurrection happens, and it's like, whoa, wouldn't you think you'd need good evidence for this?
Yeah.
And it kind of leads back to that chain of evidence to you in your mind that there's
actually
a God.
Interesting. Again, I would recommend everybody to go and read Richard Swinburne's paper on the resurrection. It's an academic paper. It's not actually a book, so you can read it in one day because it's, I don't know, a couple of pages long. It's a paper available online on the resurrection. And in there, using Bayesian methodology, he estimates that the chances that Christ rose from the dead, all things considered, is above 95%, I believe, somewhere around that range. So please, everybody, go check it out. I think Swinburne is a wonderful scholar, and I was happy to have a conversation with him personally. Sorry, go ahead, Derek.
Well, I was just going to tell you that, you know, the Flying Man is my Lord and Savior. And no, but like, don't you see his point? Don't you get what he's trying to say?
I mean, his point, and I've gone whole way through him and whole way through it with him.
Right.
I have sat down and I've asked him all the questions I've asked you, and I think that Pine Creek's views on history are a unique perspective, to put it lightly.
I mean,
I love him though. I love the guy.
It's just one of those things that I'm like, I mean, he's making up the story, of course. We know that. So it's an analogy to try and make you think like, what reason would I think that someone flew? And because people believed in it. It seems like the strongest evidence, if I were to get down to the nuts and bolts, right? The strongest evidence that anyone who's a Christian would have as actual evidence to say, well, people believe he rose from the dead. There's no, like, obviously I couldn't ask you to give me any evidence. There wouldn't be a way to prove it, even if it happened a week ago, other than, well, there was a tomb that had a body and now it doesn't or something. And then you could explain it in other ways. Did it get stolen? Did he not actually die? Right. There's all the different theories out there. But my point is the strongest evidence I could think a Christian can come up with is Christians believed it. People believed it. They were called Christians and they were willing to die for it. Those are the only two things I could think of that as evidence, but I wouldn't trust people believed in it, therefore it's true, as strong evidence for me to believe something like that actually happened, especially in an ancient book.
I share it with you. I have a big say. I have a good saying. I'm saying that Mormonism is actually a good argument against religion, because we know for almost a fact that central tenets of Mormonism are false. No one believes that there was a reformed Egyptian. We don't believe that Israelites lived in North America, and we don't believe there were elephants, or that a 19th century man translated supposed Egyptian on North America in 17th century English or 16th century English. We don't believe that, but there are clearly Mormons who are willing to die for their faith. So, I mean, I share that with you because I've said this for a long time. Mm-hmm. Mormon religion is a good argument against religion. I don't say this stuff often, but I've analyzed it, and I think Mormonism is a good argument against religion, because here we have a religion non-Mormons can agree is completely wrong, right? We know that nobody in North America spoke Egyptian. That's just a fact. Okay, that's a fact. Any linguist will tell you that much. And we know there were no elephants or horses here, and no Israelites lived here. But there are people willing to die for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you're
you're more of a skeptic than people probably grant you the credit for. And so we have a lot in common. I mean, you know what I'm
my
saying?
podcast is called Global Skeptics.
But are you applying your skepticism to Christianity like you
Every
should?
day.
That's
Every
the question I'm asking about this particular.
Every single day. That's why I'm Catholic. No one in my family is Catholic. I applied skepticism to my Christianity. That's why I became Catholic. I applied skepticism to my atheism. That's why I left it.
So what is it that Catholicism, what is it that stands firm through your skepticism, through your being critical of your own worldview? What is it that stands? And you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
This withstood my critical analysis, and therefore it was enough to say, yep, it's true. And I know that this is the one true church.
Yeah, it's consistent ability to correspond with reality.
Okay, reality. I guess wanting to know. For me, reality is the natural world, the world we live in. That I see, on a daily basis.
That tends to be part of the reality, because in reality there are universals, they're abstract objects, they're not part of the material world. So right there you have something to open your mind to. Then
so like transubstantiation, right?
Yeah, transubstantiation.
That happens every week, every single week.
Well, it doesn't have to be a week; it could be every day.
Well, that's true. I'm just saying an example. It's happening all the time, right?
Yes.
Jesus is somehow literally in some metaphysical sense.
In substance, yeah.
Right. Okay. How does that actually, in your worldview, how's that reality? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so first thing I want to clarify, and this is important, and I want to give people credit. People think that transubstantiation is a Catholic thing. It's not a Catholic thing. Lutherans believe in, well, actually, transubstantiation. Yeah, but let's not use. Okay, I'm going to talk about transubstantiation, but the technical term for the ecumenical belief is real presence. That Christ is really present, and it's believed in Lutheran churches, in most Anglican churches. Calvinists have a version of it where they don't accept that Christ is bodily present, but they still believe that it's a sacrament. Eastern Orthodox and Orientals believe in real presence. So real presence, in the sense that you understand, is believed by Catholics, Orientals, Eastern Orthodox, Lutheran, Anglicans, and in some sense by some Calvinists and Presbyterians. And I forgot Methodists. Methodists also believe in the real presence.
So how is that reality, though? How is that?
Yeah. So well, okay, so if you want a Catholic answer to that, we believe in what's called the we deny the bundle theory, and I'm not going to go into that because you wanted a shorter show, so we're not going to be able to go into.
Yeah, we're already past the time.
We're already past that.
I'm having fun though, so as long as I'm having fun, we'll sign off when I'm done having fun. And
he enjoys torturing me, guys. This is
I'm really not though. I could see you and me totally disagree on so much, and I would say you're not applying certain things somewhere, and you're saying you're not same thing. But at the end of the day, I think we get along fine.
Yeah.
But yes. So I just don't see it being reality is all I'm saying. A guy casts incantation.
It's hard. I got it. It's hard to accept things like that in your ontology. It's hard to, because you are used to a different worldview, different analysis. You're used to analyzing everything in the material. You're not open to supernatural stuff because of other reasons. Yeah,
that's true.
And that's fine. That's totally fine. As I said, it takes time, right? It's going to take time. It's not going to be easy. And in fact, I mean, it's not easy to believe certain things. I mean, how easy do you think it was for the entire Europe to change their belief about the Earth being the center? Like that itself, Earth being centered, geocentrism was one of the most believed doctrines of medieval Christendom. That was a key argument that we are at the center of the universe.
Can I give you on the topic though of one of the things that kind of red flags for me, right? Like, of course you're right. I don't believe in the supernatural. That doesn't mean it's not possibly there. It just doesn't reveal itself to me, and it hasn't. So if it is there, it's hiding from me on purpose. Show yourself. I'm just saying, there's not evidence there for me. And if it was, I wouldn't be an idiot, sit here, say it's not there if I had that evidence. But one of the things I know is Dionysus. There's a ritual where not only was he a wine god, we know this, and I'm sure you're aware of the Bacchae and whatnot.
Yeah, that's another influence you have from the mythicist side. This is
it's not just this isn't a myth.
I know, I get it.
There's other critical scholars, but point is there was a tradition in the Dionysian temple overnight, they would leave a water jug in the temple, and the next morning they'd come in. There was 3 jugs, and the next morning they'd come in, and there were 3 jugs of wine, water into wine kind of concepts. Yeah. And even the Titans would chew the flesh of Dionysus in one of these myths. But the point is, I could see how another Osiris type drinking and eating, of participating and ingesting the god as another ritual. I would put that on the same playing field as the eating of the flesh and drinking of the blood to gain eternal life with Christ, in that sense that this is a common trope. It's not this idea of eating of Osiris or eating of Dionysus or eating of Jesus. It's common. And for me, when I start to see that common thing, I go, well, what makes this one like?
Yeah, that's So that's the mystery religion argument. I call that the mystery religion argument, and it holds a lot of sway on people. So in Christian theology, we emphasize mystery, and many people have taken this and applied what's known as a comparative religion account, which is that Christianity started out as a mystery religion, and they try to draw parallels. Now, of course, I used to hold to something similar, and I used to have that kind of problem that you have. Of course, the solution to that is simple: sound scholarship. Sound scholarship demonstrates that the wine references in the New Testament and in Christianity have to do with wine symbolism in the Old Testament. They don't have that much to do with mystery religions. And again, reading sound scholarship on the topic, and not outdated 19th century
Dennis R. MacDonald. Do you know who that is?
I've interviewed him on my channel specifically.
Dr. Dennis R. MacDonald. What did you interview him on?
I interviewed him on the Homeric epics being, found in the New Testament. Me and him became friends. At least we're friendly. And I am familiar with his work. I've been familiar for a couple of years now. And I know Dennis MacDonald.
You don't think his scholarship's good?
I actually think his scholarship is amazingly good.
Well, he's the one who takes this approach, but he also does. It's not on all of the text, mind you. We're talking about the Gospel of John when we talk about this particular.
Yeah, I think Dennis MacDonald is an amazing scholar. I never said it otherwise. I actually think Richard Carey is wonderful too.
Do I need to rewind this? No, I'm just kidding. You guys are watching, right?
I've always.
I hope you said that, because it sounded like you were taking jabs at the guy, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
I take jabs at some of the views, but I'm on record saying I think Richard Carey is an amazing thinker. I
think so too. I mean, dude, I don't agree with everyone there. I don't agree with you. This is why I'm a friend of everybody. To me, man, it's like you can see where I'm coming to my conclusions. If you look at Acts, for example, in the book of Acts, do you think? And it's just a simple, straightforward question. Do you think that Acts is not only mimetically connecting the Old Testament narrative, but it's also potentially using like Second Maccabees and Euripides the Bacchae within its narrative of Acts? Do you think that there's mimesis between Euripides the Bacchae and the book of Acts?
Well, I've looked into it, and I think it's a possibility, but
there we go.
So there's this black and white thinking, right? Black and white thinking comes from not being familiar with ancient Greek history. Ancient Greek history draws parallels, and this is how history was performed a lot. In fact, one of my favorite historians, Plutarch, and I'm sure you've heard of that one.
Oh, yeah.
Wrote an entire history based on drawing parallels between Greek and Roman figures. And the fact that he tried to do this does not invalidate his historical accuracy. And this sort of black and white thinking that if there is mimesis, then the historicity is doubtful, is a false dichotomy that unfortunately is very common among people who are not familiar with Greek scholarship. Now, I, of course, I'm
not making that conclusion.
That's fine. I'm just addressing.
But Dennis MacDonald also, he draws these mimetics, and he doesn't deny.
Guys, go to. I'm going to take this time to advertise. I'm joking. So go to youtube.com/Canadian Catholic. In the Global Skeptics podcast, me and Dennis MacDonald had a wonderfully pleasant conversation. I know the man. I've spoken with him. I think he is a wonderful scholar.
Legend. Get his name right.
Yeah, Dennis R. I am. I was reading Plutarch before I was 13.
Are you flexing your brain on everybody?
I am.
You better stop that crap, bro. Don't do that on my channel, man.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Not allowed. Only Derek is allowed to come off looking smart.
No, I'm teasing. So another question, Dr. Joshua Bowen, what is your beef with Dr. Joshua Bowen?
There is no beef. Me and Dr. Joshua Bowen will be having a
better not be.
Yeah, Me and Dr. Joshua Bowen were scheduled to have a discussion either today or yesterday. I can't remember. Unfortunately, something came up, and Dr. Joshua Bowen and I will be having a cordial conversation the moment he is free, which will be one of these days. So there is absolutely no beef between us.
Okay, yeah, I love him to death, man. Dr. Bowen is a wonderful guy. I hope that conversation goes really well. What were you going to talk to him about?
Well, I think that it's going to be a cordial conversation, but I think that he's pushing the view that Sumerian myths undermine Bible too much, and I, as a Mesopotamian enthusiast, would like to humbly disagree.
So, okay, you're an enthusiast. He is an ancient Near Eastern scholar, in particular Assyriology.
Yeah, I love Assyriology. I love Assyriology.
Do you think you know better than him about this?
I don't think I know better than him, no.
About this. I'm not saying you know everything better. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make a funny here. I'm saying, do you think you're right and he's wrong about...
I think I am right. I don't think I know more than him.
Where do you think you're right about the whole Mesopotamian thing versus him on this? What do you think? Like, what is his claim that you're disagreeing with?
Yeah, so there's a couple, but one of them is that by seeing the similarities between Assyrian narrative structures and the Old Testament narrative structures, that gives us prima facie good reason for doubting the historicity, and I disagree there. I'm going to give a brief overview. I'm not going to spoil the whole interview.
Oh, no. I don't want to spoil it. I like the appetizer, though. But I think his claim is ultimately, though, intertextuality is the number one thing. Is just showing that they're utilizing this. In as far as historicity, I don't think he's arguing necessarily that because it's using Mesopotamian backdrop that it's somehow, I say backdrop as in like it's using a Mesopotamian narrative to rewrite their own.
Yeah. There's a lot of Mesopotamian influence in early narratives, but I think that there's a false dichotomy going on when people say that it invalidates its historicity.
Okay, so that'll be the topic. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah.
And what he has to say about that. I hope it goes really well. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. But
so, do we have any more like super chat questions? I don't want them to be ignored.
Is there any? I didn't see any pop up. If you guys have any questions, feel free super chat. You know, whatever question you have right now before we jump off. This was a last minute, yesterday. He emailed me yesterday, and I just came back from cleaning my house and fixing up my house for my kids, and I'm back.
Yeah, so you have a second channel too, right?
I do, a recovery channel.
You're like a drug addict or something?
Ho, what?
Oh,
actually, I was hooked on drugs for many years.
What are you recovering from? I don't know what you're recovering from.
Mainly, my main drug of choice was opiates that I was addicted to. And then at the end, it was heroin. I was injecting heroin, and I was like on the brink of death with that. But then alcohol as well. I was definitely an alcoholic. In fact, I relapsed once at church, taking communion in the Presbyterian church, because they do real wine, unlike your Baptist who want to give you a little bit of grape juice. I wanted the real deal, and I felt that warm fuzzy go down my esophagus, and off to the races. I wanted to drink just like Jesus did, and I just don't know how to do that like normal individuals. Nothing wrong with that. I choose not to anymore. But yeah, that's my other channel, man. I help people who struggle with addiction, just to show them it can be done. And I'm a unique case. I'm someone without God who shows that you don't.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, you don't need to be religious in order to get clean or sober. Now, it works for a lot of people. I'm not going to deny that. I'm saying it didn't for me. It was like replacing an addiction for me. Yeah. That's how it was for me. It's weird. A little different than most people, I guess, on that. But I don't know. Do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I do actually. So why do you deny that God exists?
Why do I what?
Why do you deny that God exists? Sorry, I'm trying to connect my...
Deny, as in like I take an affirmative position in knowing that God does not exist?
Well, why do you assert that there is no God if you do?
I don't think there's a God for the same reason. If I were to ask you to prove something doesn't exist, that doesn't...
I'm not asking you to prove...
No, I know. I'm saying I until I have the evidence, right? For me, it's not definitive. It's not that clear. And the more I look into scientific approaches and saying, hey, all right, we have, for example, abiogenesis, right? This is something to look into. Looking at science on this whole topic. How did life begin? There are natural explanations and they make sense. I'm sure you know of What's his name? The philosopher guy, because I'm not a big philosophy guy at all.
That's fine.
I don't know if you are or not.
I
Graham
like
Oppy. You know Graham Oppy?
I love Graham Oppy. Graham Oppy. I respect Graham Oppy so much that I haven't critiqued him yet. That's how much of a respect I have.
Oh well, keep it up, man. Don't critique him then.
Yeah.
No, do what you want, man. No, but for me, I just don't have that. I think a natural explanation, how things are and the way they came to be, didn't require an intelligent,
I would
metaphysical being. Does that make sense?
I'm just gonna put it. Yeah, it does. But I would just disagree with the whole thing. I think that in the world there are natural ends, and again, I'm not gonna go into this deeply because that's fine. But I believe there is natural teleology, and without natural teleology, we wouldn't make sense of abiogenesis. We wouldn't make sense of evolution. And actually, Thomas Aquinas' fifth way deals with how natural ends show evidence of intelligence. So I actually would use what's supposedly the natural way things came about, which is abiogenesis and evolution. And I would argue that you can't make sense of them without presupposing some kind of natural teleology. Again, I refer people to Aquinas' Fifth Way. You guys can also check out this book by Dr. Edward Fazer, Aquinas. By the way, you need to read this one, Derek. This is written at a level anyone would understand, so no excuses. Edward Fazer is a top.
I've got 100 books to read already, man. What are you trying to do to me?
Well, 100 first never hurt. Are you a big book guy? Because I'm a big book guy. I mean, I collect books. This is just one room, I got a bunch of books that I love.
Well, good, man. Keep on
I
reading.
Like 3 sets of Britannica alone. I just adore books. It's an obsession of mine.
Real quick, we got a super chat here, and I got a couple other questions. Mr. Keeps on Ticking. Can you ask Canadian Mithraist if he is able to read the Bible in its original Aramaic, Hebrew, and Koine Greek? Praise Sol Clown Invictus.
I can read Koine Greek. Understanding is harder, but I can read the letters. I can't read Aramaic or Hebrew.
Okay.
But I have interlinear Bibles where it's much easier to make sense.
Thank you for answering that. Thank you for the super chat, my friend. Kip Davis, Dr. Davis. Do you know about Dr. Kip Davis yet?
No. Is he a doctor? Hi, Kip Davis.
He is. Dead Sea Scroll and, of course, documentary hypothesis, all that nice stuff. Do you think I don't know if the Catholic Church takes a stand against the documentary hypothesis.
Well, yeah. So I think that that there's good reason to think that Moses did not write entirety of the Pentateuch. I think all that requires is Pentateuch contains Moses tradition, which I think everybody agrees it does. That being said, I think the documentary hypothesis, as originally postulated by Julian Wellenhausen,
right? That's outdated.
Wellenhausen is outdated.
What about Joel Baden and then modern?
Because there is no consensus, I see no reason to stick with one point over another. I think there is no way to prove it. But the original,
would you fall between the supplementary and the documentary, though, or do you totally neglect both schools of thought?
Well, I mean, I used to lean towards supplementary more, but now again, I'm not I don't want to take a position when I don't have to. I'm saying that the documentary, as was postulated by Dr. Wellenhausen, has fallen out of favor. And because it's fallen out of favor, ways to reconstruct it are also taken seriously, of course, but I think they ultimately have problems.
So why do you have so many encyclopedias? He said, I don't think I've seen so many outside of a public library.
Okay, so let's see. I have many in others, but let's see how many I have in this room. So this is Britannica 91. The whole thing. This is World Book 2015. That's Collier's Encyclopedia around 96, 95. That over there is another adult Britannica, the red one, from 78. Below that, we see Children's Britannica. That's around the same time, I guess. And below that is the Philosophy Encyclopedia from 78. I have a couple of other encyclopedias out there. The reason why I just love them, I love illustrated books. I love to have knowledge books. Actually, the encyclopedia parts I open very carefully, and I don't regularly use them because I think that kind of wears the books out. So, for example, people are surprised to find out that I have online subscription to Britannica because I prefer to read the online version rather than wear these books out. But I love to read.
Well, I could see that you enjoy that, and thank you for the question. Sorry, Dr. Kip.
Thank you, Dr. Kip. Thank you for
Appreciate that. Maybe one day you'll bump into him again. Indo, thank you for the super chat. He says, even Justin Martyr addresses mystery cults being similar to Christianity, saying they're the work of time-traveling demons. There are obvious influences, in my opinion. It's not a reach. Matthew 13, 11 to 13. Thoughts? Let's open up Matthew 13, 11 to 13.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what they're seeing in 11. Oh, yeah, this is another Carrier thing about outsiders being given knowledge from origin. Guys, I love Carrier, but you need to take off the Carrier glasses. Anyways, so Justin Martyr addresses mystery cults. That's correct. He's interacting with the mystery cults that have undergone euhemeristic development. The mystery cults themselves will bear some resemblance to Christianity because...
You probably can't see that, can you?
Yeah, I can. He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. That's why I speak to them in parables. And then quoting Isaiah, though seeing, they do not see. So hearing, they do not, hearing, they do not understand. They do not hear or understand. Yeah, so this is another point that's used by Carrier. I think Derek kicked me away from being
No.
joking.
Did I? Do you want me to pull his thing back?
No, that's fine. So basically, this is another point from Carrier, basically saying that, like, allegedly origin thought, which I'm actually not convinced Carrier is interpreting that correctly. But Carrier's point is that, like origin taught, this verse teaches that the true meaning of Christianity was supposed to be hidden, and whatever Matthew says isn't supposed to be the true version. Now, of course, that's not a respectable interpretation. What Christ addresses here is obviously supposed to be a fulfillment of how, even though he would speak in plain language, their hardening of heart would make it hard for them to understand. So it's actually quite interesting that Carrier gets the opposite of what true meaning there is. But yeah, thank you so much, Endo XD. There is certainly some overlap. That's why we have a field called comparative religion, but it's overblown by people.
So you definitely say there's no direct genetic connection between mystery cults and Christianity.
There is no direct genetic connection. There is a connection in the sense that there is an overlap between Greek philosophy that was used in mystery cults and Christianity. So we see some influences of Platonism in Hebrews, where he references Plato's theory of forms, actually saying that, things we see here are shadows of what lies beyond. That actually has a very Platonic ring to it. There's a lot of Platonic influence we see. There is possible Platonic influences, John, as well. So if you want to call that direct, then be my guest. I don't think there is such direct borrowing as, like, some characters were taken right from the other. But yeah, there is some overlap between Greek philosophy. Again, check out Hebrews. Hebrews almost explicitly references Plato's theory of forms.
Interesting. I must have missed Kokichi's question.
That's fine.
Please write the question. I'm going to look for your comment right now. Please write the question. And that way I don't miss it. I apologize if I somehow missed it in the midst of our conversation. We've had some fun, and then sometimes I try to come back. But it sounds like we need to get you and Dr. Carrier together. I think that would be
it would be my honor to have a discussion with Dr. Carrier.
We'll see if he's up.
I've read his book
on the historicity.
You
read the whole book?
Well, I read the relevant parts.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I read the relevant parts.
I'm testing you now, man.
Mark
what he just said. Keep that on the tab.
I have read the relevant parts of it. Again, I've had correspondence interactions with Carrier. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful scholar. He is extremely gifted. His knowledge of philosophy is far superior to many of people, and for a good reason. He has a master's in philosophy. His, knowledge is really high. That being said, unfortunately,
he's wrong about everything else. No,
he's not wrong about everything.
I'm just putting words in your mouth on purpose.
So, for example, he's right about the fact that historians need to use Bayesian analyses more. He's right about that. He's not wrong about that.
Awesome. I'm interested to hear your guys. We'll figure out something. Discussion, debate. We'll probably debate, man, because you guys disagree on some stuff. I want to see it hashed out. Real quick, we got a good question here. While I'm after this question, I'm going to roll down and look for Kokichi's because I didn't mean to miss that. Ben Roberts has a good question. He says, MythVision podcast, what does Canadian Catholic think about Vatican II? Does the church changing its mind on things undermine its authority? And then in vein of that question, where do you stand on the Vatican II Some Catholics are like, nah,
Yeah.
they're
So
not okay.
Vatican II is a council that needs to be accepted. It's an infallible teaching. At least Vatican II is infallibly a council of the church. Let me put it that way. That being said, Vatican II does not alter that much about the church. That's a lot of propaganda. A lot of what's taught in Vatican II is found in prior church documents. Almost all of the dogmatic teachings of Vatican II, and almost all important teachings of Vatican II. That being said, we're not necessarily opposed to the church changing its mind, in the sense that it might have a particular outlook on things and other particular outlooks. We've seen that with priests' marriages, right? Priests were permitted to marry for centuries before. And now priests in the Latin Rite are not permitted to marry. It doesn't necessarily undermine the authority. I wouldn't say so. Not necessarily.
Okay, well, appreciate the question. We found Kokichi here, and he says, MythVision Podcast, the Catholic Church teaches that Jesus is 100% human being, but also teaches against Nestorius, that Jesus isn't a human person, only a divine person. How can he be 100% human? And then he continues, only a human person at the same time, and not a logically impossible.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the Catholic Church teaches that Christ is a divine person. So Christ is one person. Christ is not a human person. He's a divine person. That's what Chalcedon teaches. What Chalcedon teaches is that the divine person took on a human form. But the human nature and the divine nature, even though they're two natures, are not... So let me put it this way. The divine nature is not really connected to the human nature. There is no real relation. There's a real relation the other way, but not this way. So, for example, the fact that human nature changes has no bearing on the divine nature, except through predication. So we will say that Christ died, but that will have no impact on Christ's divine nature. And this is how it can be. And just to clarify, Christ is one divine person. He's not a human person and not some other person. He's a divine person who has a human nature. That's to clarify.
And goodness, this gets back to like why we believe this. Why do you believe that that's true? Why do you think
one, because the Bible teaches Christ's divinity. The other, because the church has consistently taught it, and it dogmatically defined it at Chelsea.
So it is, okay. And I guess I'm asking a question that I expect that kind of answer from. It's like,
it's in the Bible.
It's in the Bible, and the church believes it.
It's in the Bible, and church believed it and still believes it. Yeah.
Got it. So in order to get you to maybe potentially be critical of that, you would need to be convinced the church is wrong. What would it take for you to be convinced that you're wrong?
The question is way too broad. There isn't a
single... Well, no, I mean, like, if you ask me, like, because there's a lot of positions I've debated, right, theologically.
Yeah,
where these guys who, real quick, I just want to make a point that for our audience, this isn't for you. I want our audience and you to understand this. Yeah. There are certain positions I have debated that are almost unfalsifiable. You can't falsify their claims. They are committed. There is like no way to convince them. In fact, there are some people, possibly, I suspect, that are QAnon members who are not letting up, even if all the QAnon prophecies did not happen. Now, there's some stuff that's just unfalsifiable to some people. What would convince you? What would be falsifiable to you? Like, I can tell you something that would convince me that Jesus is really true.
I think that, if Jesus did not exist, or there is great reasons to think he did not exist, that would undermine the faith significantly. If it were to be proven that Gospels are copied from earlier texts, that would
like if Matthew and Luke borrowed from Mark, or
no. I mean,
you talking about other mimetic connections and stuff?
Yeah, I believe if for example, it was proven that Jesus was a mimesis of some figure in the past, that would be another. There's so many. I wouldn't want to go into like all of that. There's potentially a lot of things that could invalidate the Christian worldview. If it was proven that naturalism is true, if somebody were to show that there is absolutely no reason to think that there's anything outside the natural, that's a good argument against Christianity. There's just a ton of things that would invalidate Christianity. And the only thing they all share in common is that they're all false.
So all of these positions, you've explored the world, everything there is.
I'm not saying I've explained the world.
I'm just asking because I wonder, you said you came to Christianity for intellectual reasons. And if we haven't intellectually exhausted our mind on all these positions, why draw that this is true without knowing for a fact all the other ones are false? Why didn't we at least test that first? Why didn't we say, before I jump to the conclusion that a man, God, came down, died, walked on water, healed, rose people from the dead, died and rose himself, and all this stuff is literally true, which sounds fantastic to me. I used to not think it was, but now I do.
Yeah.
Why draw that conclusion this is true and not pause and say, before I say this is true, is there a better potential explanation? Could it be that
Sure.
I'm missing something?
Yeah, that could be. But as I've said, the point with Bayesian exploration, one advantage is we don't take a single piece of evidence and just apply that. Now,
so is Bayesian probability? It's a probability, right? So you'd say
it's a way of looking at it's a way of looking at evidence. So we don't just take one fact, such as here is a claim in Mark that Jesus rose from the dead. Can there be a natural explanation? Yes. Therefore, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how we work. We take all the evidence together. You take the evidence from Mark, from Matthew, from John,
mm-hmm.
from Luke, from subsequent history, from what we know about the world, from what we know about supernatural, from what we know about God. And then you take two worldviews, a worldview in one Jesus didn't rise from the dead, the worldview number two where he did. And when you compare these, one wins out. That's what I mean when I say evidence. I don't disagree with you that if you take one passage from Mark and you say, forget everything, do we have a natural explanation for this?
Uh-huh.
Sure. There is.
What if you do that with every what if I take individually each of these passages and point out certain flaws or characteristics about them that can be explained naturally, and then you collectively take them together and go, every single one of these damn things that I thought collectively went in one direction are actually collectively.
Yeah, that's another point, right? You could have two possible explanations. One is naturalistic explanation, one is non-naturalistic.
Right.
The point is, which one has less commitments and which one is more able to account for evidence? There are certain evidence that naturalism will be able to account for, but there are certain others that it won't be able to account for. And that's the point of Bayesian analysis, that you take all of them, you don't omit anything, you don't go as you prefer,
Mm-hmm.
you go as what the facts suggest, and then you draw a conclusion.
I mean, if I were to read the text, right,
Yeah.
just reading these stories that I'm reading, the Gospels, and I said, hey, what is it saying? It's saying he rose from the dead. I mean, it seems like that. Now, you'd have to like poke and prod to say, well, there's certain claims that some are saying they stole the body, or, you find these details within it. But when you're writing a propaganda that is pushing for the reader who's reading this to believe what they're saying, kind of hard to dissect that material itself and act like we're going to get truth out of it if that's the actual text that is trying to push you to believe in it to begin with. So I would say you need to take more than just Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, et cetera, and potentially take a bigger world around you and say, what's more likely? There's a lot to it.
Exactly. You take everything together and you analyze. You'll always get the two worldview things just from dialectical analysis, right? You're going to go right here. Is Christianity true? Right there. You got two positions. Either it's true or not. That's two worldviews. Build on it. We go later. We say Christianity is true. Did Jesus rise from the dead? You got two worldviews for you. There you go. Again, comparison begins. Another one, atheism is true, but do abstract objects exist? That's the worldview. Whether abstract objects exist or don't, that's the dialectical worldview. So it's always a battle of worldviews.
Mm-hmm,
okay,
mm-hmm.
It's a battle of your worldview is my worldview, and the battle, unlike what some would say, is about evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And evidence, you don't just cherry pick it. You take all of the evidence, including the evidence that contradicts your beliefs and the evidence that supports your beliefs. You don't omit anything. You don't cherry pick. And when you put them side by side, you analyze it, and that's when you reach the conclusion.
Interesting. So why aren't you doing it then? No, I'm just kidding.
That was a great joke. I have to say that.
You gotta understand. I'm a great comedian here. My friend Eric from Peru. What is going on, Eric? Thanks for the super chat. He says, hi, bro. In Matthew 16:18, Jesus mentions my church. Which one Jesus meant? The Roman or the Orthodox church, since they are two different. And nice haircut. Thanks for the compliment. So which church is true, the Catholic or the Orthodox? I
assumed that it was about his haircut and not mine. I just love that.
Look, the question was posed to you, but that in part, you know who it was talking about. Come on,
nobody tells me I have a nice haircut. Trust me.
No, but do you think Jesus is talking about the Catholic Church here, or do you think he's talking about?
Let me clarify. Yeah, so the Catholic Church means a universal church. What Jesus is talking about is his church. Now, whatever that church is, I obviously believe it's the Catholic Church, but I'm not committing others to believe that. I'm saying as long as we agree that he's talking about one church, we're on the same page. So Orthodox and Catholic Church are split off from each other. we were a single church, and to be honest, Presbyterians were also part of the Catholic Church. In fact, Luther said, I never left the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church left me. He said that. He believed he was still a part of the Catholic Church. So we have these tensions with each other, but we have to remember most of us come from the same root. So at one point, Lutherans and Orthodox were members of the true church. And if you ask them, they feel the same way about us. They say Catholics were a member of us. They just, schismed away and then, got something.
Who's right, though? Who is right?
Well, obviously, in the end, I'm right. That's how it
see, I knew you came to MythVision for a reason.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, this has been a fun conversation. I hope people watching enjoyed. If you want to hear more, he has a YouTube channel. Go harass him there.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So just a couple of things. So, guys, first of all, I want to thank Derek for taking out his time to have a conversation that quickly. I want to thank him for doing this live. I prefer live rather than edits and pre-recorded stuff where we awkwardly smile at each other. I prefer the live thing. I just want to say that in about 2 hours I will do what I call debate night. That'll be open. If anybody wants to come in, have a discussion or a debate about all of those topics, that's completely open, no moderation, unlike what Derek has been subjecting me to. I'm joking. And guys, just make sure.
Say what?
Yeah, I was joking. And guys, make sure we host some of the world's greatest thinkers. By the way, anybody watching from mine, go ahead and subscribe to Derek. Check out his stuff. But whatever you do, never donate to his Patreon. I'm joking. Donate to his Patreon when he converts. Okay.
You're the clown now. Look who's funny.
I'm always the clown.
Oh man.
Right,
no.
I'll see you all in 2 hours on Canadian Catholic. Drop by. Thank you so much, Derek, for
this. Yeah, man. No problem. Look,
I enjoyed it. God bless you, and happy recovery from heroin.
Yeah. Hey, 6 years come October the 25th. I'm glad that I know.
One thing I'm going to say: heroin is better than cigarettes. Just never touch cigarette. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think that's a smart thing to say to people.
Well, I stand by it.
Look, I've experienced it, so I quit cigarettes pretty easily compared to heroin, but it still was mentally a pain in the ass. But I do want to say for anybody listening, if you want to see a potential debate, discussion on this topic of this Bayesian approach to the resurrection, or is Christianity true? I would love to see that happen, and let me know. You guys can email me. I know that it will take a little bit of funds to be able to get the time of Dr. Richard Carrier to be able to come on to MythVision to do that, and then you and me can talk in Messenger, figure out a time in which this would work.
I am more than happy to appear on Derek's channel again. I'm more than happy to encourage everyone to subscribe to it and then immediately unsubscribe.
Yeah.
So to subscribe
I
to
hope it permanently sticks.
Yeah. And I will be honored to have a conversation with Richard Carrier. And, all right. God bless everybody.
Thanks, man.
Take care, Derek. I hope everything's fine with you, your family. Thank you, Anthony Guthrie. Thank you to all who donated. I want to thank you all for.
You're going to heaven now. These were indulgences, secret indulgences you didn't even know about.
You didn't even know about them.
Didn't even know it. You're going to heaven now.
I'll see you all.
All right, man.
I'll see you all in about 2 hours. Thank you so much again, Derek. And everybody. God bless everybody. Okay, take care.
You.
Bye.
All right. Awesome. Look, I last minute just decided, what the hell? Why not? Let's hang out. Let's have Canadian Catholic come on. I didn't know who he was, and then I remember I think I briefly saw him talk with Pine Creek Doug, and I just couldn't put two and two together because he was on my Facebook. We were already friends on Facebook. Guys, I'm not a mean guy, right? Like, it's not my thing to sit here and bash or anything. I want people to understand and track where my thinking's at. I want you to know where his thinking's at, and wanted you to kind of see like where people draw certain conclusions and why, right? I want to apply critical method. I hope I'm being consistent in my own mind as to why I think the way that I do. I could be wrong. I'm totally open-minded to that, but I wanted you guys to see, and I hope that that was somewhat enjoyable to some of you guys. You got to tolerate it to some extent. Some of you guys can't stand that conversation, but I don't know. I had fun. I think he is a nice guy. I think he thinks he's right about these things, and I wouldn't be that confident. And I'm not assuming that I know or like I have these answers, but I wouldn't be as confident. And I'd enjoy having conversations in the future with him too. Just as I continue to pick up this Bayesian stuff, because I don't know a damn thing about Bayesian, probability or anything like that. Maybe you guys can share this with Pine Creek. Let him know, if you guys are friends with him, that I brought his name up, and maybe Dr. Josh brought his name up. Just letting these people know that I had a conversation with Canadian Catholic. And if you guys want to check out his live, do that. Let me see what you guys have going on. Jerome says, I'd rather listen to DD than him. Genuinely insufferable at times. I cannot tolerate DD. Darth Dawkins is the last guy I would want to have a conversation with. He's just, that's insufferable. I don't know how people could like sit through and have conversations with him. I'd feel like he'd be so derogatory towards me because I just couldn't deal with his like follow my script argumentation on his presuppositionalism. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. In real life, I'm damn sure I don't think he would talk to me like that in real life, but I'm saying like on the show, I couldn't do that. Let's see. Blood Cell says love it. Oh, I'm glad somebody loved it. Somebody enjoyed it. I had a little fun. I hope you guys appreciated it. Australian Jesus had more credibility. Don't do that. Don't do that. Somewhat enjoyable. Absolutely amazing. I appreciate the compliment. Thank you so much. Stick around and chill with us. I will stick around for a second and see what you guys have to say. See what's going on here. Ignorance breeds contempt, and CC has lots of that. Someone says, none believer. Carrier might require a donation to talk to this guy. Well, he requires usually a donation period because that's how Dr. Carrier, survives is doing this. He's not working in a academic setting and things like that. So helping fund that will help. Someone says CC is always right, a bit like G-Man. I don't know who G-Man is. I don't know who G-Man is, but I did feel a sense. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, that there was a sense of a presupposition there. Not that he's a presuppositionalist. He believes that he's an evidentialist, if I'm not mistaken, and a Thomist, philosophically speaking. But there's like that. The church is the authority. That's true. And I'd like to know how do you know that that's true, right? That goes into a lot of details. My confidence level isn't high in Christianity, as you well know. So I would be a lot more cautious on any of those type of absolute conclusions about anything that is like that. I don't see, and I brought that up earlier, like, I know this is basic common sense conversation, like people don't rise from the dead. But if you run to the Bible or other literature, you might find that people are rising or ascending on high, like Julius Caesar. There's like mythological text of him having apotheosis and stuff. People don't do that on a daily basis. To me, that's like common sense to me. And if I saw that happen, these things happen, I've had Christians say to me, nope, doesn't matter, because in John chapter such and such, I can't remember which gospel it is, but it's the one with Lazarus. And he says, send back someone from the dead to tell my 5 brothers about this place so that they won't come here. Right. And he says, nope, they have the law and the prophets. And even if someone rose from the dead, they won't believe in that. I honestly call BS. I call BS on that. Like using that argumentation. No. It obviously convinced Thomas. Thomas didn't believe and he needed to see and feel. So I'm not convinced of that. I would need to see. And we don't see that stuff happen. And if it did, then this conversation probably wouldn't even be happening, because what would be arguing? Which version of the supernatural is correct? Well, my God's the one that did that, not your God. It's kind of silly. Continuing, sorry. We got super chat here too. Let me get the super chat and then jump up. Oh, my boy Eric says, can I buy my indulgence here, Derek? 100%, bro. Hamakashima. Dude, you're healed. You are healed. Okay. And don't worry, that passes on to your family members as well. And they will be okay. You guys know I am so joking right now. Let's see. Damn, questions are flying, guys. Let me scroll down a little bit here. No. I'd rather listen to hours of a fork scraping across a plate. No, guys. Okay, I get it. Some of you guys didn't like what Canadian Catholic said, or you didn't agree with it, or you definitely think like, I could see why, because I didn't agree with a lot of things too, but I hope that this is just, those words are just kind of exaggerating because my voice was included in this, and I hope it doesn't equate to a fork, you know. Alan Bird, MythVision once was enough for me. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the comment. Jesus was a group, not just a single man. I've heard this idea that Jesus was Israel. Never read the book, though. The guy was trying to send it, didn't have time. I'd rather go to hell for eternity than having to share space with DD forever. Oh, goodness gracious. Darth Dawkins. Let's see. I'm being for real. DD is at least interesting and funny. I guess everyone has a different opinion. I look at him like a Jerry Springer type guy. He's more like obnoxious. I feel like there's probably mental health issues there, and I'm not trying to be funny or make fun of him or anything, but there's legitimately something wrong. I don't have the patience for that. And trust me, I've got patience, you know. I can sit through some stuff and have great conversations with people like Jesus from Australia. I might even get this guy named Lord Rael, who has like a cult of 100,000 followers, to come on and share how extraterrestrials visited him in the 60s or 70s for 6 days. And they have a message for us. So I don't know. I might interview him. I'm waiting to see if that's going to happen. I have patience. And I'd rather listen to Lord Rael and Australian Jesus before Darth Dawkins. That's my opinion. So the evidence that a resurrection takes place has to be high. Oh, well, then we definitely need Darth Dawkins on, someone said. I'm not interested in that. Carrier and CC aren't even in the same league. It would be a massacre, Mr. Mott said. Anthony says it was fun. Thank you, Anthony. Anthony is my friend, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. No, but seriously, Anthony, you have a clue, but you really are glue to multiple pieces on what's going on to MythVision and other channels. And I really appreciate you, man. Seriously. Really, really do. William says, good discussion, Derek. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. How's the weather? I think it's raining right now, MythVision. It's raining here. Sorry, I'm reading your thing and saying at the same time. It was just a thunderstorm outside while I was recording here. And that was because Zeus was angry at how we were trying to defend the resurrection of Jesus. Zeus was not happy with what we were discussing here, you know. Look, even Muhammad says, look, Islam is the truth. So you're going to get Zeus mad, man. Like, he's going to want to compete and fight Allah, and it's just not going to look good, you know. We don't even know that what Jesus looked like, so we can never believe he rose from the dead. We have nowhere near enough evidence. So what Jesus looked like and him rising from the dead, to me, are two separate completely, but I get your point, is that we don't have sufficient evidence. I saw a wonderful interview. I shared it on my community tab on YouTube with Holy Kool-Aid, where one of the Christian apologist scholars, if you will, was talking about we had first century evidence of a Markan gospel. And no, we don't, by the way. But we're going to talk about that with Dr. Kip Davis and Dr. Joshua Bowen. I hope to hear. That should be next Wednesday. We're going to do a live at 4 p.m. And I'm setting that up. But we don't have that kind of evidence. And they were making this assertion until we found out there isn't that kind of evidence. And long story short, they were comparing Washington, George Washington, to Jesus. He shows the evidence for George Washington is extremely greater than what we have for Jesus. And he goes into the examples and showing it. The earliest manuscripts we have of any fragment is mid-2nd century. Of anything that we have. We have no archaeological evidence for Jesus himself. We might have some people that are mentioned within the narratives of the Gospels or something, but no, it's not that great. It's not that great, which doesn't mean it requires there wasn't a guy. At the same time, it's possible there wasn't, but I lean there probably was a guy, but knowing anything for sure about him, tough one. It's tough, especially when you got a guy who's walking on water and he's doing all these, what I would say are mythological, very mythological text. They're highly theological and mostly probably taken from the Old Testament narratives. Yahweh is, hovering over the face of the water. Well, Jesus is here walking on water. There's potential there. Or you can look at the potentials in other myths. Is there a mimetic connection between Homer? We don't know. What is going on in your mind when you have such an opposing view, but don't get insulted when the jabs get thrown your way? Look, man, great question. I'm glad someone pointed this out. Like, how can I take a punch and it doesn't faze me, right? I don't get upset. Honestly, I get where Canadian Catholics coming from. And sometimes as a human, I empathize. Like, I know suffering alcoholics and drug addicts, for example, right? Not equating Canadian Catholic to that. I'm using an example of my life. And I know where they're at in their thinking, and I understand why they're where they're at. They're human like me. I don't take, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings. It just doesn't. It's not something that offends me, because I know there's something to lose in his mind, right? Faith in Jesus and hell and heaven, and there's a lot there to lose. To me, I'm not convinced at all. You couldn't ontologically at this point make me feel tugged by giving me the idea of what if you're cooked forever by God and stuff. It doesn't tug me. It doesn't even touch me. I'm not fazed by the judgment claims of I'm going to be judged when I meet God face to face and things like that. That doesn't scare me. So I'm not hurt by it at all. Appreciate the question, though. It just doesn't insult me. It doesn't offend me in any way. And I'm not an expert. I don't claim to know, like, I have all the answers. That's why I interview experts. I've learned quite a bit just interviewing scholars on this to know that we should reserve our confidence. We shouldn't have such confidence in these things, but other people who are believers will have confidence in things that you would say, I need better evidence for that. That's what faith is, in my opinion. Someone says, isn't it $450 an hour? No, it's not. It is not that much. I think you're talking about Dr. Carrier. No, it is not. It just depends on what he's got going on at the time, too, but it's way more affordable than that. You don't want to know who G-Man is, someone said. I don't know. I think that that's Carrier's rate. It probably depends on if it's a debate. That you might know something I don't. I need to ask him, because when he does shows with me, it doesn't cost that much. But if it's a debate, that might be a different cost. So once again, thanks, Eric, for that. Your indulgence. You're clear. No hell for you, buddy, or your family members. You guys go on living the sin you want, okay? Someone says that Canadian Catholic is crazy. I didn't get that gist. I just think he was a believer. I mean, there's a lot of believers out there like that. I will say this about me. I won't talk about other people like that, but I'll say this. I was crazy Christian. I was extremely fundamentalist, but I never thought I was crazy even when I was that. I just was like, damn, how far I've come in my thinking to where I am today from when I was a Presbyterian, when I was a Reformed Calvinist, and before that, when I was just a regular evangelical Christian. Someone says, I don't think so. Shouldn't be that much, man. Wow, you're so lucky to not have heard of Gary the G-Man Moore. I don't know who that is. Jerome Robinson. At West 501, you brought me here some nostalgia with that name. Troll Jesus, if you don't know who G-Man is, cherish that ignorance. Damn, everybody. Isn't G-Man who supports the biblical slavery? Shut up. There's a Christian who supports that? Believe me, you're not missing anything, MythVision. Funny, but sadly true. Damn. Okay, I'm skipping a little. Caesar worship. So Caesar worship as a divinity occurred simultaneously to the Gospels. All right, I'm going to start wrapping up here, guys. I'm trying to see. No, at MythVisions. Yeah, you're right about that, Wes. Fear of hell is a big thing. And yes, I think hell is nonsense, but I understand where people came up with this. You're worried about your safety now. You're getting into Islam. Are you worried about your safety now that you're getting into Islam? Nope, I am not. Not at all. I've had threats from Christians. I said this in a live earlier. I've had Christian fundamentalists, extreme. Now, those would be crazies, threaten me. They've threatened me. I'm not, doesn't scare me at all, literally. I just would rather say why not, or leave the reasons I'm not afraid off air. But trust me, I am thankful I live in a country where I have rights to defend myself. And so is what it is. And I'm glad I can vocalize these things, because I hope that what I'm doing at MythVision does change the world. I hope it does make an impact and free people from thinking these ideologies are the only way to live, and these must be what it is. You have to live by these things. This is the truth. I want people to start to open their mind and realize, damn, you don't need that to be clean off drugs or alcohol, for example. Most people think you need God in order to get clean, in order to get sober from drugs. And I'm an example that that's not the case, going on 6 years now. And I want to hopefully continue to be that example. So, yeah, I'm not afraid of nothing when it comes to that. John was, the only thing I'm afraid of is my dad. And physically, I can explain why I think I would overtake my father, but man, the fear of dad is something to be afraid of. You know what I mean? John was written by a community in several phases between 90 and 125 CE and is not an authority on Yeshua. Ray, I love it. You're bringing in the critical stuff. Love it. It's a good question, William. I wonder if members of the RC Church having contradictory views on so many issues isn't a sign of weakness of belief, since they don't have the courage of their convictions leading to schism. Good question. You know, I like to bring different views together to kind of go at each other. Gnostic Informant, thank you for the super chat, my friend. I appreciate it. If hell was real, then we would all just become master transcendental meditators just by naturally spending eternity in one state. Would we find a way to get used to the heat too at the same time? Oh, goodness gracious. Indo asks, yes, a Christian threatened me. So one of my videos, I don't know. Here's the story. I'm not going too far into this. Quick story time. I don't remember which video it is, but I've been getting a little more vocal. I've even had Catholic apologists, and Canadian Catholic said he's not an apologist, by the way. So if anyone's wondering, he says he's not. And I said, but you're defending what you think is the truth. And he said, but I don't stand for any type of like ministry or anything like that. Long story short, this guy comes into my DMs on Facebook and he messages me on MythVision, and he said something about, you're wrong, you know, typically what Christians say, you're wrong and you're denying the truth of Christ, you know, the typical presuppositional approach that you hear people kind of come at. And I said, well, in what way am I wrong? And he started to bring up William Lane Craig. And of course, I have my thoughts about William Lane Craig and his theology and his approach to things, because I used to listen to him 1,000 hours, you know, in the past. I mean, I've consumed tons and tons of William Lane Craig, his Kalam Cosmological, and then, of course, his ideas of Christianity and stuff. So I started saying, look, there are other critical scholars I think have a lot more weight in these topics than William Lane Craig. And he flipped the script. You're an effing idiot. I'll beat your effing, you know what? And I would kill you, like, in the name of Christ. It's almost like if you watched that, video that was done towards Richard Dawkins. I get the two confused now because Darth uses Richard's picture sometime and does some distorted cartoon with it. And he has these Christians sending him love mail, and really is going through it and like, you're this, that, and I'm going to watch you burn in hell from my goalpost in heaven. And like, that's pretty horrific that your worldview can have you thinking that of people that oppose your worldview. If your worldview is having you do that, that's pretty crazy. Well, the guy was threatening me, and I threatened him back, like not with death, but I said, dude, I'd beat your ass so bad. Like, you know, I'm talking shit. I'm a guy. And I was just talking shit back. You know, he was talking shit back to me. And then that was it. You know, he never responded to my last final question that I wrote him. But I was just having a little fun. Yeah. So that was a threat from a Christian to kill me. And then I've had other Christians saying that they would beat my ass, things like that. But very few times has that ever happened. As far as Islam, like, there's probably a different level of crazy out there, and I'm certain there is, but someone has to speak out about some of this stuff. And I don't think there's enough of that is out there on the internet. And that's what I'd like to say. I live in a military town as well. So lots of people believe in a Second Amendment right here in America. And let's just put it this way, you know, you're walking into a dangerous situation if you think you're just going to come after someone like me or anyone in this type of place. No. So once again, there we go. There's story time for you, my friend. I appreciate it. Scientologist. I'm definitely down with that. You know that. I've got this Sunday, I'm doing an interview with, I I keep drawing blanks on people's names today. Karen De La Carriere, she's coming on again, and you do not want to miss this Sunday's conversation about how the Scientologists they use like mob-like tactics on a governor or something down in Florida. I got to hear what she has to say about this, but this was literally on the news. It's a known thing. So scrolling up, I must have missed someone here. There's Canadian Catholic. He's in the chat, guys. Be nice to him. Alan Bird, that's irrelevant. What you said is true of Plutarch's account in regards to JC. He's like, he has to come into the conversation. You guys, he's not here to defend himself. He's got to defend himself, right? So someone says he is, I think, Canadian Catholic is exactly an apologist. Someone thinks he is. All right, in the name of Jesus, damn, that's scary. Yes, in the name of Jesus, the guy was talking about, like, for Christ, almost like you would imagine someone fighting the Muslims in the Middle Ages or something like that, like they're doing it for God. And that's what it sounded like to me when he said that. I was like, I've never had a Christian do it. I showed my wife and she's like, no. I said, yes, this guy threatened my life. Beliefs are strong. Don't do drugs. Okay. Don't do beliefs. Sorry. I'm being funny. Derek, you're late to Islam. There's plenty out there already. So there is, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's enough people doing that is what I'm saying. I mean, tons of people talk about Christianity. Christianity is totally okay with criticism. But like if you go to apostate prophet who's already doing criticisms of Islam, he can't even talk on Twitter. They've banned his Twitter account. There's a lot of people that are censoring the topic of Islam because they're worried about people becoming Islamophobes. And that's not what I want either. I don't want people to be anti anyone who is a practicer of this faith, the same way I wouldn't want someone to be anti-Christian. Like, I don't want you to hate a person because they're Christian or somehow have a thing against them because of their belief system. I do want to point out flaws with the text. I want to point out flaws with the belief system, the horrific ideas that come with it, and the way that women are treated, and the way that it's a slave mentality. I want to do that. So I think more could be done is what I'm saying. I think more could be said of that. We got a lot of people who do anti-apologetic work on Christianity through YouTube, but there aren't tons when it comes to Islam, and I want to see more. Trying to see what we got here. Someone says, Ethan says, apostate prophet's recent video imitating Islamic scholars was hilarious. I thought so too. When he's talking back and forth to himself, debating himself. Yes, for sure. 100%. I hope you guys stand with me on that. I think my MythVision audience for the most part would be people who are critical of horrific ideas and cults and things like that. But also be critical of beliefs that aren't as bad. I don't paint everything as the same color. And not everyone who believes in Islam, for example, is a terrorist, or not everyone who's a Christian is a fundamentalist person who wants to, hopes everyone goes to hell or anything. People are different, and there's various colors and shades of gray, if you will. Not everything's black and white. But I think tackling these things and educating people like I have been on the Bible, I've had tons of emails. I can't tell you how many people have said, because of MythVision, you have helped free me of that mindset in realizing how not clear things are textually and how easily things could be understood differently. So it's not that cut and dry, which is why someone like maybe Canadian Catholic would say, well, we need the Catholic Church to really steer the boat on which direction we should take foundational beliefs as far as Christianity is going, how we need to follow this, what we need to believe. But I want to go back before there's like a set in stone church and one thought. I want to go to critical scholars. I want to look and say, were there different ideas, different types, different sects of Christianity prior to Irenaeus and Justin Martyr and whatnot that might have had different thoughts? And, I like to get into the little nook and cranny of these things with the scholars and see what they have to say, rather than just going with the authoritarian approach. Even Elaine Pagels, does that. And tons of that's on my Patreon, guys. So if you haven't joined it, please consider helping us out by joining it. Someone says, as an ex-Jesuit scholar, I disagree 10,000%. But I might be jumping in the middle of a conversation here. I could be mistaken. You might be saying that to me. I'm not sure. I think, so I'm reading, I think this is why Western peeps get frightened of Islam's misogynistic. They don't want Muslims to subconsciously signal to ex-Christian, now atheist Westerners to go back to the old ways, Derek. Interesting. Gnostic informant, One Love, Free My Ninjas. Catholic Church is the Church of Peter. Look, guys, I love you. I stuck around. You got to give me that much credit. I didn't even plan on sticking around. In fact, I was going to get off when he got off, but I hung out with you for a little longer. I have 14 to 16 to, I don't even know the number of videos with Dr. Joshua Bowen that I need to edit so that I can put on to the MythVision Patreon early access for you guys who join, help support me. I've got a video that I did with Steven Sorensen I need to put out as well on, he goes into forgeries and stuff like that throughout history. And then there's another one I did with a scholar on homosexuality in the Bible. And that one I thought was really interesting, getting into the places where it condemns a man laying with a man. Is it talking about homosexuality in one of these places, I think in Leviticus or Deuteronomy, I think it's Leviticus. All this stuff. These are scholars that I've interviewed. I'm looking forward to releasing those. So I love you guys, man. Seriously. I appreciate you. Someone says, were you a hyper-Calvinist? Or I was kind of, I guess. I was very super-lapsarian, if that makes sense. But I did believe in like preaching the gospel to people, if that matters. I got that far. I wasn't there at first. I saw inconsistencies in Calvinism and that they weren't really being consistent. Like infralapsarianism doesn't make sense to me, even though we can all make sense of things by saying what they think it is. God, like, he had no control over Adam and Eve initially, if you will, with their first fall. He kind of like permitted it to happen, but wasn't actively involved. But then after that, everything is determined and predestined. It's weird. So I love you guys. Appreciate you. Thank you for sticking around as well to hang out with me and talk. If you guys need anything, you got any questions, email me. If you send me death threats, I'm just going to kick your ass. You know what I'm saying? This is what I do. Because, don't forget, we are MythVision. See y'all later.